I had like vision boards. And so the secret was big when I moved. It was like 2008 when I moved, right after Glee. I was like, oh, great. This is going to be amazing. It's going to be really easy. Didn't book a job for like a year after that. I like tested for 2 pilots. I like huge, big shows. That's how I felt in my dream. It was like, you are banished. I was like, literally like the Taylor Swift song, like, no, I leap from the gallows and I levitate. Like I was levitating. I feel like I swear to God, this dream felt like I levitated from the bed. Like it was a wild, very vivid dream. But
thank you so much for sharing that beautiful story. Like
message, and it was like everything's going to be okay. And I was like, who keeps pressing on my back and kept telling me this was 2 weeks before it happened.
Today on Elevated Conversations, we have the pleasure of talking to Susie Abromeit, who is an actor, a writer, a producer, all the way from America. She's lived in LA, Miami, now planted in New York. We talk all things spiritual. We go super deep on near-death experiences and a whole lot more about other realms and the dark night of the soul, the purge that we all have to move through as light warriors. We hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Elevated Conversations. We're so excited to introduce you to our viewers and to share some of your medicine. You've got an amazing story we've been reading up on, and it's so good to have you on the show. So welcome officially.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're big on reading the room, reading the vibe of, right? Like even sometimes what's going on in the world and et cetera, et cetera. And you were sharing this before we started about moving from LA to New York. And I read something about in your bio about how you didn't really like the energy so much of LA anymore. And then you went to New York, though. What's the difference? Like, I've only been in New York once, but I found the energy pretty intense. So perhaps let's talk about that, because I could feel it.
So it's really interesting for somebody who spends a lot of time feeling people's energies, reading people's minds. It's if you're a super empath, it's given me prophetic abilities where I'm so sensitive and I can, I'll be like, I'll be in flow and we'll be saying the same thing. We'll be thinking the same thought, like the amount of times that more and more that's happened. So when I was living, but the more I've kind of embraced that, but living in LA, it just, there was so much magic for such a good period of time. And I had come from originally Boston. So then I moved to Florida when I was about 12. I was like a semi-professional tennis player. Tennis was my life. I moved to a tennis academy, but Miami was also a very intense energy where it feels like I was living out of the movie Euphoria, where everyone's kind of overdosing on drugs. There's a lot of money. It's a lot of like new people coming into new money, and a lot of New Yorkers who were very unhappy, wanting to solve their problems, thinking that the temperature would make it better. Because New York, like I've always have great, amazing experiences here. The people are so, it's a hot take, but in my experience, because I'm very, weirdly, I'm kind of, I'm very extroverted. So I love being around people, but if there's like a good flow, a good vibe, but I'm also very sensitive to it. So I'm kind of also an introvert. So if the energy is bad, I'm like, oh, I got to go high. Oh, and I can get my energy from both. Like I regenerate from my own energy and from friends and being social. So they both, but it just depends on the flow of the energy. So that's, but then Miami was a very specific, chaotic energy that is off the rails. Like literally the amount of accidents that I would see on I-95 of like car accidents, animals run over constantly. Like it just felt chaotic and people were always overdosing and crazy, terrible things would happen. So I loved Miami and I loved like the Latin culture and the food, but there was a lot of other pockets where there was just a lot of massive dysfunction. And so when I had left to go to California, it felt like people, because I was pursuing acting and I tested for the show. Like I was just starting getting into acting, and I ended up going through a series of like 6 auditions. It was my first, I flew out for my very first audition in LA. It was this little show called Glee, almost booked it, didn't, but like met a best friend. We both didn't get it and we became best friends and producing partners. But when I moved out to LA, what was interesting about the magic of Los Angeles is people were concerned about taking care of themselves. They were, thinking about bettering themselves. There was a lot of like, awareness around, I mean, at the time it was like Tony Robbins, it was like NLP, it was a lot of, Joe Dispenza. It was all the things that I was sort of aligned with and wanting to, I had vision boards and The Secret. And so the Secret was big when I moved. It was like 2011, was it 2008 when I moved, right after Glee. I was like, oh, great. This is going to be amazing. It's going to be really easy. Didn't book a job for like a year after that. I like tested for 2 pilots. I like huge, big shows, and then was like, oh, damn it. And then it didn't, you're young, you're trying to figure it out, moving to a different city, a very vastly different city, and you're trying to understand, but everyone was very friendly. Everyone was very sweet. And over the course of many years, I made some of my ride or die friends who are my best friends in the world. But it slowly, LA is a place that is you have a lot of empaths like myself. So like I'm very empathic, but I'm also very I think I can handle the truth very well, and I can handle criticism really well. So I think that's why New York suits me really well, because I can be disagreeable, but I'm deeply, deeply, deeply compassionate, where I'll take the shirt off my back and just be like, here, like I love people so much, and I love animals, and I'm always rescuing animals, but sorry, I'm like going on a bunch of tangents, but LA is a very empathic place and a lot of empathic, caring people. But if that is out of balance, it can be taken advantage of. And then you have this angry resentment that comes into that if it's not balanced, if you don't put in place boundaries, and you don't put in place where, you can be disagreeable, because if you just let everyone into your house, then everyone might ruin it, And so that's kind of the balance of, if you just let everyone get away with whatever, that's actually not compassionate. So there is this balance where you need to be disagreeable and you need to be compassionate, and it's a constant dance. And so I think all these good intention meaning people, and I can see it, but I'm like, oh, what I've noticed is when I've gotten really like proactive or been like an activist or whatever, it was also glaringly something in my life that I was putting outside of myself that I wanted to fix externally, being like, it's your fault, it's this, it's like, because of the injustices, life isn't fair. Life is never going to be fair. Like my whole family is pretty much dead, and that's not fair. And so, well, okay, these are the cards that I've been dealt. How do you deal with it? What are you going to do? Both my parents are dead, like aunt, grandparents, and it's challenging. Or house burns down, it's like, that sucks. Like all these things have happened. And then it's like, okay, we are the creators of our own world. We are powerful. We are embodying God all the time. And the more, if we can act in unison with God, with the universe, we can be bestowed more superpowers constantly, and remembering that we are the creation of our own life. And so I think the misalignment for me, when I kept growing and remembering that no matter what happened to me, after the fire, it was like the Woolsey fires, where I was renting this house in Malibu. I ended up losing everything. And one of my best friends sat me down. She's like, you can use this to, use this to cry, and you totally would be in the right, and you're totally valid. Or you can use this vast amount of energy to wield it and change your life and manifest whatever you want. And I couldn't book a job to save my life. I was I was so traumatized from so many bad choices, so many relationships that left me like riddled with serious PTSD. I'm not even, that's putting it mildly. and then the fire, and then all these people dying, and like it was too much, where you're like, I can handle like one thing at a time, but all these things happen, you know. It was like great aunt died, and then a month later my aunt died, and then a month later my uncle was murdered, and then I had a terrible breakup, like it was, and then like a year later house burns down. Like it was endless, and it was to the point where it was like this never ending hole. And so you know, I couldn't book a job, and then I sat with myself, took a time out, and there was like, you had to face your trauma, and you have to go back into the memory. And the hardest part about going back into those things is that you disassociate in the serious trauma, because, you know, you kind of like astral project to protect yourself. It's more of like a survival mechanism. But once you have to go back in, you have to go back in your body to fully see it, to fully see, experience everything, re-experience it, so you can fully understand it like a detective, and be like, how can I make different choices? How can I change my life? How can I have a different outcome? Because it seems like the common denominator is me. And so I had to sit with that, which was even, you know, just like, I just want to end it all. And God's like, no, bubble time, don't end it. And I'm like, he's like, sleep on it. Just take a nap. I'm like, no, I want to end it all. God's like, you just, okay, if you want to end it after 30 minutes, you know, fine. We can retalk, you can end it, fine. So I took a nap, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm feeling better. So sorry, that's a very flippant way of saying it, but that's exactly what happened. And then I was like, I piece by piece put my life back together, and then changed my life, and then came into more money than I had ever experienced in my entire life. In work, like I booked The Purge shortly after that, when I was like going to quit acting. And then booked the movie with Will Smith, King Richard, and then signed a 4-picture deal. And it just, you know, hasn't stopped, and all this money, like constantly. And so that was the lesson that taught me so much. And then so I had changed. And what I had noticed is, during the pandemic, it took a really, and like, people are right, like they're not wrong. I think there was a watershed moment with everything that happened, which, you know, between the Me Too and Black Lives Matter and everything, there was like all this abuse, and people, like, I know that for myself, when you had gone through so much trauma, you want to bring it to light, but if you hadn't processed it yet, it's going to be very angry. It's going to be like, you know, the conversations that I had in my dreams. I think there was a dream that I had. There was a very long relationship I had. It was like a 9-year, but it was very like tumultuous, and like it was like the thing that it left me with PTSD for sure. But I remember having a dream that I was like Jean Grey, of like banishing him from this eternity and next eternity. And I was like, oh, damn. Well, I need more therapy, because this has been like 7 years, and I thought I dealt with this, but I'm still rageful and angry about this. And so I think when those movements happened, it's like, this isn't fair. And then you have to look at your own participation, and how, you know, at least for me, like in my own experience, how did I call this in? How did I bring this in? Where did I go wrong? You know, because we're always creating our worlds, and we're always, you know, and we can create the meaning, and we can reframe things, like how whatever happens to us. So in those experiences, so I think like when this happened, it was a lot of people, like it was all coming to light, which I think was really necessary. The unfortunate thing about it, it just was very messy and chaotic. And then there was a lot of anger, and people were, you know, and I get it, like destroying things, because that's how I felt in my dream. It was like, you are banished, like literally like the Taylor Swift song, like, now I leap from the gallows and I levitate. Like I was levitating. I feel like I swear to God, this dream felt like I levitated from the bed. Like it was a wild, very vivid dream. But I can appreciate the level of anger, but then it's also the anger that you had within yourself, that you like allowed it to happen, you know, in some way. And so I think when the pandemic just went sideways, and I think for a lot of homeless people, like who have mental illness, and, you know, they're coping with all their problems with drugs, and their trauma with, you know, this is how they're self-medicating. And, you know, it's it kind of sounds like you guys are open to this, but it's like, I kind of think like the mystics think that schizophrenia is actually because like spirits are talking to them or demons are attached or whatever the spirit world is. And so they're having these communications with the other, like beyond the veil kind of thing. And so they're coping it by drinking, but then they're making it worse and exacerbating the problem. So they have like a period of relief. But I would always notice that like when a big, huge energetic wave would come, I would be like, I checked the, canary in the coal mine, and I would see him like, yo, my buddy James, how you doing? And if things were bad for whatever reason, like you could just feel it. It would be like a heartbeat, like, there's a steady, the placid ocean. And then if it was like this, I'm like, I'm getting the fuck out. So
yeah,
so
the panic
then,
and the adrenaline is pulsing, it's coming,
And then I think for, why I left, there was just, it was that I was fighting off robbers. I was, it was constant, like guys, it was getting really gnarly. There was I saw a whole break-in happen, it was like 4 a.m, but it was constantly during the twilight hours, like 2 a.m, 4 a.m, when all of it would go down. And basically the cop to my neighbors, he broke into their home, like, stole their car, totaled the car. They didn't do anything about it, but they're like, oh, with his rap sheet, you're lucky to be alive. And I felt it. I saw the guy, and I've never been more terrified. It was this. I was like, oh, fuck, this is bad. So sorry for cursing, but, so that's when I left. And so that was when I realized I'm no longer aligned with this energy. And then I went to Park City, and I spent just 2 years kind of, when I met my neighbor, I literally, because I would take my taser gun in LA everywhere just because people were constantly getting robbed. I was hearing my hairdresser got robbed. It was like really nice. It didn't matter where you were, nice neighborhood, Venice, where I was living, like it literally didn't matter, good neighborhood, bad neighborhood. It was gnarly everywhere. And I think people, like the movie, The Network, were mad as hell and we're not going to take anymore. It became Gotham City. And when I first came into Park City, I'm walking my dog, probably like 11 at night. And I run into now one of my best friends, Randy and Autumn, but I like had a taser because I didn't, I'm so used to seeing people in the street and ready to like attack because they're going to attack me. Usually, and so I have my taser gun, and he's like, yeah, I'm just with my 13-year-old dog who can barely walk.
Hi, neighbor.
That's how we bonded. So we bonded over that. But then I think the dating pool in Park City, it's more of a ski mountain town, but I love the nature. I loved reconnecting to nature. That was, my mom had lived out there. So I think I was kind of reconnecting with that place spiritually with my parents in a sense. Yeah. And like, I felt like I connected more with my dad in that place because he was a big skier. And so I feel like I got to, I don't know, he's been dead for 17 years, but I felt like I got to connect with him in a lot of beautiful ways. And I got to just be in nature and sit with myself more and just be in the quiet, be in the alone, look at the stars. And then I realized I was like, oh, I'm gonna die alone. So then I moved to New York, and I just always have great experiences in New York because I'm built for New York. Yeah, I'm, deeply compassionate, but I can like, stand my ground and be like, I'm learning martial arts, especially. So I'm like, nah, bitch, like, no, calm down. Like it's just it's more direct, but the people are so open. You'll literally be at the grocery store and they'll start talking to you. You're like, oh, are we in a conversation now? And so you'll meet so many amazing people, but then also they'll like you make a New Yorker laugh, they'll buy you drinks. They're like, I got you. Like, it's the most amazing. I don't know what it is, but they'll take you in. They'll be like, they're like, when I had a best friend recently commit suicide, and and so I'm like going to my local restaurant, and the guy next to me was like him and his wife, they're like, we got it, don't worry. Like it was a $70 meal, and like, where does that happen? So I've never had more experiences like that over and over and over. Like they would be like, no, like you know, I was grieving. My mom had just passed away 6 months ago. And so it happened right as I moved 5 days later. And so there'd be like pizzas on the house or drinks on the house or, you know, desserts on the house every single time.
That's so kind.
I like my Aussie friend who came to stay with me, who has a film in Tribeca, he literally is like, people are so friendly here. Like, so I kind of feel the same way, that just people just have your back. It's just more aggressive as long as you understand and have awareness that like people need to get like everyone, they walk really fast, they need to go, they're like, I don't have time, you know, time is money, and like everything costs an insanely high amount of money. Talking to this, like this moment is too much time to spend, like it's money, like everything is like 3 times the amount of any place I've ever lived in my life. It's twice as expensive as LA for sure. But
thank you so much for sharing that beautiful story. Like it's, you know, you talking about your story, you really are a true light warrior. We see the old soul in you as you just express it all.
yeah.
Like you went through this massive dark night of the soul, and that's the shift. And now you're dancing in a higher frequency. So when you're saying everyone's so nice, but you've elevated, you've done the inner work to get on that radio station to receive those rewards now. Like had all of that stuff not happened, perhaps it could have been playing out in New York, you know, like in another frequency, another reality. And you're right, you are creating your reality. So all of that stuff with your parents, the house burning down, I mean, that is sorry, but that is a story. Wow, like all of it. And, you know, sometimes we think our story, you know, but we hear other light warriors' stories and we're just like, yeah, those soul contracts, you know, you think you can do it all before you incarnate.
I was like, what did I do in my past life? I went to a psychic and she was like, you were king in your past life. I was like, that tracks.
Because you're thinking
I must have done
like
some shit.
royal. It was like, why am I having all this shit stuff happening? I'm royal, you know?
Well, you know what's even crazier? I had no idea, because so many people died in our life, and I don't, you know, I never knew my grandparents and no one really knew our story. So before my mom passed away, I went digging for a good like 2 years, and I went on ancestry.com and found out that her family come like great grandfather, the Viking king pirate Rollo, ruler of Normandy. So and so like comes from, you know, he had I guess he was friends with the King of England or something, but then he was given like land. I guess they had like an alliance because he's like, hey, don't pirate me or whatever. So then they have an alliance, but then this whole series of knights, like it's like 20, like on this one frame. It's the the Peck name that was actually from Peak or something.
So you probably love the Vikings
Anna Vassar.
then. Is that resonate?
I've seen it.
Have you watched Vikings? Yeah.
So Game of Thrones was like, yes, I love it. Like, cause like the Viking in me, like I finally understand. I think it's really important to understand your root of origin, because I have a lot of energy and my mom was a force of nature. When she was 70.
Vikings. You get Rollo's one of the stars. He's like Ragnar's brother, and he becomes friends
No
with the King of
way.
France
You have to watch
and gets
it.
lands and
It's like a story.
works his way into that kingdom, and all the French love him. And if you're linked in from ancestry,
You're just going to be sitting there going,
I'm excited for you.
I'm excited.
I'd want to watch it with you. Go and see this. I'm muting my podcast.
Like that resonates.
Yeah.
You know, well, because I just
discovered New York as well, I might just point out. So that's probably why you've gone to these lands to like integrate over there. That side, the East Coast, they discovered
over
that. Yeah.
This is wild. So my family lineage, so apparently this is what I figured out. So the family lineage, so the role of the Viking king pirate, and then all these like knights, and they all had they were captains of ships, like they were all like obviously like, and that made sense because you see it from generation to generation to generation, and you're like, trying to fix the family, like you're like, this is freaking ancient. Like of all the, you know, whatever past trauma or whatever, the epigenetics, and it like literally it blows my mind of whatever familial patterns, like until like, so I've feel like I've broken it. I feel like I've broken the patterns of this, of my
The lineage.
lifetime, the lineage 100%. Oh my God.
Susie, if you
I
don't
mean,
mind me pointing it out, in that lineage is the life lesson of being in control. So you losing a lot of close people around you, and then the fire coming along unexpectedly until it drops you to the point where you're so low, all about showing you the illusion that you're in control, because we're not in control of anything. We like to think we are. So people who have panic attacks and post-traumatic stress, it's all this desire to feel like they are in control, which is an illusion of the soul, which comes from thinking that we're separate from source, but we're not. We're a drop of the ocean in that vast, you know, we're the wave in the ocean, and we think we're all alone and there's no one here around me and life's unfair. And you know what? Screw whatever, the source and karma and the secret and all of that crap. It doesn't make sense because I'm a good person. Why is this crap happening to me? It's because of the illusion of being in control. And you've understood your lineage and saw kings and captains. What do? Control, make decisions, like to stay in control. So you're here in this lifetime and you've gone through that lesson where you were like, stop it, this is all, you know, you've had that deep moment and navigated your way through it, and now you're on, as Roxy was talking, a higher vibrational level. You've like kind of pulled yourself through that. It's like a demonstration of how you've moved through your life lesson and how your law of attraction changes, because once you learn the lesson, you no longer need to attract into your life situations where you're out of control, and you move back, interestingly, to the East Coast, which is like where your roots are, because you've gone off and done the journey, right? You've done the journey.
You're coming home, baby.
So like literally I talk about this, and I mean, hold on, there's we can keep going, right? Because I love these conversations. I love that we're the source of God, and that like here's the thing. The thing is, we have no control because whatever contracts we signed up there of like what's going to happen. So like in this life, we come here to forget, right? We come here. So like near-death experiences have been my new thing. That I got, you know, stuck on the algorithm because I'm always, you know, searching. And so for the last 2 years, before my mom died, I was preparing about like how I've just heard hundreds of, you know, life review after life review, and it's always the same. It's specific to each individual, but it's always like, you know, they astral project, they suddenly like, oh, the body, and then they realize it's them, and then they're dead, and then they see the light, and then they see their parents. So when my father passed away, he was already talking, right before he passed away, he was talking to his parents. And I was like, and already we were having these telepathic conversations when I had, there's a whole, like, I have a whole mystical experience of like when this whole thing started. Because of being a pro athlete, I learned how to meditate when I was a kid, when I was about 12. And then I started, when I, in that space of meditating just to relax my body, I started experimenting and just like talking to God. I'm like, what's this God business? And, you know, my like tennis coach, he talks to God. Oh, all right, God. Whoa, like I was, you know, a 12-year-old, like, I was like, I'm gonna try this experiment. Okay. Because my parents were agnostic and they didn't believe in any of it. My mom called herself a recovering Catholic, didn't believe in organized religion.
Just shifted that and just been like, I'm just channeling God or my higher self. I don't know. And they'd just be like looking at you like,
what?
That's the old soul. That's the old soul. It just knows.
100%, 100%. And it's funny because the reason why I was like first drawn to going to church, because there was a boy that I really liked, David Irwin. If you're listening, hey, how are you? Like, I think he's married with kids. It was really cute. I was like 6.
David.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. But he went to church. And so I was like, oh, we're going to church. So we went to one. We're like, oh my God. So my parents, like, they dragged their feet to church. And then I'm like, well, this is really boring. I don't know what the hell they're saying. And Sunday school sucks. And I was like, all right, well, I don't even get to spend time with him. All right, I'm not, this is not how I want to spend my time. Cut to me being a tennis player, learning meditation, experimenting, just talking to God. And so in the space of talking to God, I would sort of, this is before meditation like was a thing. This is like, you know, mid 1990s, late 1990s, before it was like the thing that everyone was doing. So I would meditate and I would feel like I was suddenly locked in. It's like this feeling that you're locked into source and you can't, it's an undescribable feeling. And so what would happen, I would start feeling locked into the space and astral project and go out into space, like into, and I was like, I don't, this is too much. I don't, does anyone know about this? Am I crazy right now? I'm like, feel so isolated and alone in this space of meditating and talking to God. And so God would tell me in the space of, oh, hey, Susie, and come talk to me. And if these are the things that you want to do, here's like, you know, like going to happen before it will happen. And so as an experiment, I didn't believe any of that. I'm like, that's just my crazy voice in my head saying whatever, whoever this is ridiculous. I don't believe it. And so as an experiment, I started listening and things that I could never know, what would happen. Like, I'm like, I don't want to go to the test today. And God's like, no, go to school. Like I missed too many days already. And I was going to have like issues with my grades if I missed one more day. And I'm like, I didn't study. And it's the whole thing. God's like, trust me, you won't take the test. It'll be fine. I'm like, I don't want to go. He's like, just trust me. So I'm like, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to prove you this is stupid. I don't even know what I'm doing. This whole thing is like a lie, but I'm just going to prove you wrong. I go to school. First time the teacher is ever absent for 2 years. They're like, we're not going to take the test today. And I'm like,
wow.
All right. All right.
Gosh.
I'm listening.
Okay. I'm listening.
And so then like the next several years, I really became very obedient. And then my 20s happened. And I thought I knew better. And if I didn't like what God had to say or what, you know, God would tell me, like, don't date this guy or don't like, do this. And I'm like, so you're telling me I should date him? You're telling me I should? He's like, no, I never said that. No. And I'm like, no, that's what you're saying. You're like, you're rewriting history. You're rewriting everything I'm saying. No, Susie, I said no, hard pass. And I'm like, yep, you're telling me to do it. And then I had to learn the hard way of that really tumultuous, crazy, toxic relationship. And God's like, you happy now? Is that what you wanted? And I was like, no. All right, well, now you're going to have to stay. Now you're like, you made your bed. And now, and then to clean it up, God was like, hey, there was this, this is a wild story, talk about a full circle with God all over again. But, I'm in this like really crazy tumultuous relationship. Sorry, why not?
Why not?
This information is very helpful. And if anyone is going through like a really tough time, this is, you can't even write this. You can't even make it up because it sounds so impossible. So when I started, for making all the wrong decisions, making all the bad ones, and really kind of doubling down on that because I'm willful and stubborn and I wanted to do it my way. And then I was like, you're right. I was so wrong. This is so stupid. And God's like, okay, now stay in it for a while. And then I met this girl, like we both went to Duke University and we met once. And then it was just like, oh yeah, whatever. We went to the same school. Oh. And a year goes by and then God's like, message her. You guys are supposed to work together. And I'm like, he's like, this is your out. You guys are supposed to work together. She's going to save your life. Like she's going to get you out of this terrible Stockholm syndrome relationship. Get out. And I was like, all right. I guess, hey, I think we're supposed to work together. And she was just like new to the industry and hadn't really done much. And so she's like, hey, let's like sit down and like talk about some ideas. I'm like, I have this idea, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward to, she helps me out of this toxic relationship. And it's like, as we're writing this piece, it goes immediately. It's like goes to relativity. People are so interested. And I was having trouble leaving this toxic, abusive relationship. And you kind of like brainwash yourself in these situations. And so for me, my manager at the time was like, when she found out everything, she's like, leave him or you're fired. And Christy at the time, the girl was who we were writing buddies. She was like, you're going to ruin everything. We're going to lose this whole deal with relativity, because I was like falling apart. And so our manager at the time was really helping us push this forward. So she's like, don't mess this up for us. So I ended up being forced to being like, we're done. And so now I had the support system I needed. And so I moved out. Everything was like amazing. And then like literally 2 weeks later, I introduced her to her future husband. So they immediately, and so every time, so now, and then we end up working together. She ends up being my writing partner. I end up like being one of her best friends in the world. And I was there at her home birth, filming for home birth. Kind of, it felt like an ayahuasca journey.
It is like an ayahuasca journey.
It's like an ayahuasca journey. Oh my God. And I wasn't even doing it. I was just being there to help. And so fast forward, and we just shot this project about my mom passing away that we filmed together playing best friends. And it's called Grief Looks Good on You, about the passing of my mother and the 24 hours after, like, how do you manage, like, how does grief look better on you? Because, American culture doesn't process grief very well. And I think in my own dysfunction of buying all these, dumb clothes, like that's the stuff we hold on to. So it's like that's my glaring obvious, where it's like, oh, when I don't deal with myself and I don't deal with the sadness and I don't deal in deaths, many deaths happen all the time. We're constantly growing. If you're growing, you're also dying. The old version of you dies. And so Grief Looks Good on You is sort of an examination of that. But how could I possibly know that some total stranger who I met once was going to be my best friend, that you're supposed to work together and she's going to change your life and she's going to get you out of this relationship? It could have stopped at any point. I literally talk to her like 5 times a day. We're working on projects. Like, we have all these other projects going. We have a show with one of the biggest Oscar-winning writer directors in the world right now. And, all these amazing things are happening, but like, who could have known that? Like, I couldn't have known that.
So good.
And so like, the relationship with God is like so powerful and very cool. And, but I do think like we have no control over, like God gives us free will. So when I think about like manifesting a great love, I'm asking for something very specific, but I don't want to bend the will of somebody else, like manifesting that you have to give like so everyone has free will in this space. And so you have to allow for that. So like, yes, we have no control, but you have to be the vibration like of what you want to attract. And so it's like, if you're operating at that frequency, then you'll just attract all of that in. And I've seen that time and time again. So it's like, we are God, though. We are like, you were made in my image. I mean, that's so clear to me that like, we are this existence in this body, living this life that we forgot. I don't know if you do psychedelics, but when you do psychedelics, you're like, oh, I remember this place. I remember this all knowing. It's the same thing of like meditation. You smoke weed. Like for me, it's like occasionally I'll smoke some weed and like look up at the stars and commune with nature and, talk to animals. And it sounds crazy. It feel like a Disney character because, literally I've had videos of just animals, just like a bird, just total wild bird just chilling on my hand. Like, where does that happen?
Yeah.
Or just chatting. I've had a deer in the wild. What? That doesn't, I can pull up the video. It's a wild experience. It doesn't. So I'm like, when you're sort of operating on that frequency, it's we are all powerful. And, I was just chatting with a friend who's kind of going through something, and I'm always like, well, where did you participate? How did you bring that into your life? Like, and he's like, well, everything you've gone through. And, I'm like, yeah, like my mom just died, but now I'm turning that into something beautiful and amazing and honoring her, but also, using that experience for something good to paint with versus just, so I'm also I'm grieving through that process and putting it on the screen and, which I think is the truest art form. You're changing its form, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm here, how do I get here? Is always what I'm using art for. It's the same sort of thing. So it's like we have no control, and we have all the, we are the creator of our worlds constantly.
I love
I mean,
it.
that's
You're being the alchemist. You're taking that energy and you're creating it and redesigning it, because it's still energy at the end of the day, and we can manipulate and transmute this energy, or we can take it and be the alchemist to make it into magic, which is what you're doing. So good. It's great.
And of course, that's you, the old soul that's done this before, because when these difficult lessons happen to you in your life of all these things, like, and you signed up to a hell of a soul contract, right? There's a lot of crap's happened in your life. And it's like,
yeah, but
gosh damn it, I'm ready for it. Before you were up
don't
there,
feel sorry for me.
you were
I have a
up
great
in
life.
the angelic realms.
Good life. Good life.
Up in the angelic realms.
I have a good life, but a lot of crazy
Slow
shit.
down.
But but also I do really think with the whole near death experience. So they die, they have the astral project, they have to go through the life review. So everything sort of, when I've really watched that, the life review is every time, and I constantly do that anyway in my life, is like practice empathy of how this makes somebody feel. But sometimes we can be so involved in our own stuff, of like whatever big problem we're trying to overcome, or the obstacles we're facing, or the trauma, or whatever, you can kind of get stuck in that. But at this point in my life, I've really been focused on how we all affect one another, and how I want that effect to be a really positive one. Like, even though like you can always be like, even the negative things can be positive, because that's how I've changed a lot, where I'm like, I'll use the negative things to paint with, or I'll use all of it. I prefer to have happier experiences at this point, where I'm like, can I just have because I had a few good years where like there was no chaos, and I looked up and I'm like, oh, thank God. For like 2-3 years, I'm like, oh, thank God. This has been a very hard karmic year. My mom dying, and having a college best friend pass away as well, and like back to back within 3 months span. It's just been a lot. And then just a lot of like change in relationships and things like that. Because I do think when you're kind of elevating, then people, can't continue on the journey, kind of thing, where you're like, if you are walking in the path of love, some people aren't going to come with you,
That's right. Yeah.
and you can't stop your path. You have to keep going, and they can always join back on. There's like two vibrations, I think, of this is kind of what I figured out after my mom died, where I was like, whoa, the expansive nature of grief, of like where you can have these experiences where you connect so much more over the veil, and you download all these information. Like when people die, you have this like huge pops of energy. Like when the fire happened, like when I started to be able to manifest, like for instance, it was like, oh, I want to be Dave Chappelle's friend. And then suddenly he's sitting next to me at like the bar at like Nobu. And then, we're chatting, and he's like, hey, you want to go to, me and my friend were like, hey, you want to go to Peppermint? I was like, hell yeah, I want to go to the Peppermint. Like some like VIP party. The next thing you know, I'm like hanging with him in his, his crew for the next like couple months. Like, so every time something terrible would happen, I would use it to manifest,
Because you're
something
dropping
really
the
cool.
density, and new energies coming down, that life force energy from the creator.
Yes.
It's like, here, this is
balance.
the reward. You just purged. Here's more. Have the reward now,
Balance is a law that can't be transgressed. So every time that there was the balance of something terrible happening, I would always use that, to my advantage, because you have to. There's there's an opportunity there. But going back to the, sorry, I'm like all over the map here with I'm just like, oh, it's just so, I find these conversations, like this is the kind of stuff I love talking about, because I spend so much time in the spiritual realm of like talking about this stuff and understanding the near death experiences. Of what my understanding is that you go through the life review, all the good, the bad, the ugly of however you affected people. And so when I've heard that, like I've made a lot of great decisions in my life, and when I've made mistakes, I've taken responsibility for it. So now I'm like, how can I you know, my best friend when I was the hot mess phase of my life, she's like, you know, I would be the girl who just totally redeems herself. Like I'd fuck up and then just be like, I gotta keep being friends with you because you're totally redeeming. You just introduced me to my husband. Okay. Like something amazing. Yeah, okay. She's like, how long are you going to play that card? For as long as I can use it. But like there would be, and so now I'm not having to make these like big mistakes and make these big grand gestures anymore of like, let me fix it. Let me find a way to like, and it was just more my own chaos of all the things that I had went through and not knowing how to move through those things properly and holding on to it, or, you know, because you still somehow want to stay connected to them or something, you know, you want to hold on to it. And, you know, in letting go is, yeah, it was just really hard. But the whole near-death experience and how I understand it, and how they, you know, then they meet God or Jesus or whoever, you know, I guess however they view the world from their lens. And then, you know, and however long their near-death experiences, you can keep going for far and far, and like it keeps going, you know, however long. So I find that the ayahuasca journey, the psychedelics, and near-death experiences, they're all the same, you know, and my dreams are very similar, where I'm a big lucid dreamer where I can control my dreams and the dreams will tell me what the dreams mean. And, you know, I've had a lot of psychic moments happen where there's no way that I could. So for instance, recently I had a dream, about 2 months ago, and the dream was, this police car van ran over my dog, Charlie. My Charlie, he's totally fine, thank God. But this police car van ran over my dog, and the policemen are like yelling at me and screaming at me, like, how dare you? Like, I'm like, and it's their fault. They did it, but they're yelling at me. Cut to the very next day. The next day, I'm walking on a crosswalk. I run into a friend and we hug at the crosswalk. Light turns green, and all of a sudden the cars are moving. And so I'm with my dog, Charlie. And so I'm like, oh no. So I'm running to the other side quickly, and Charlie's collar flies off. And now he's just in the middle of the road, kind of wandering around, you know, and now he can dart to any side, whatever. And then I look, and the car that's coming is a police car van. And I'm like, I immediately remember the dream. I start screaming. I make like, oh, stop, like a huge scene, and everyone stops and everyone looks around. And now the cop in the van is yelling at me and going like, ah. And I'm like, and I scoop up Charlie. I run to the other side, and I just went, oh my God, I avoided the situation that literally was going to happen. So it's like the more that you connect, and I don't know how it works. I don't know. I
Like
really
you're
don't
getting
know.
premonitions to help you on your journey, and you're seeing things before it happens. That's becoming online. That's good. It's great. It's insights, and it's a gift.
And I feel like the more that I've been connected to people dying, that has become more frequent.
Mm.
Yeah.
'Cause
It's jumping around different timelines.
yeah.
And as your consciousness elevates, as you go up into higher frequency states, you get access to that, because the laws and the rules of the density, right, low vibe, aren't applying to you as much. And certainly for yourself also, as an old soul, and doing some of the psychedelics where you remember and it's strangely familiar, and your ability to navigate life lessons and go, oh, I went to hatred last time, or bitterness or resentment in other lifetimes. You know what? I'm just going to forgive this one. Or, you know what? I've dealt with grief and loss before, and I've dealt with it the wrong way. This time I'm going to use it as a catalyst to inspire other people and to help them grow. Like that's the demonstration of what we call not just a light worker, but a warrior. Like you take the inspiration and you turn it into action. And I think I appreciate you sharing, I'm sure, stories that you probably haven't talked about too much before, you know, because often people are just talking to you about
Oh, no. I will talk people's ears off. I will go right into it. If they want to hear it, I'll be
Love
like,
it.
hey.
That's so good.
It's like how deep you want to go. That's like how deep we go in here, you know?
Yeah.
And it was such a beautiful
No,
conversation.
totally. And like for me, it's, you know, the latest thing that I've done is like people who've done me dirty. Where I was like, and you can see where their trauma, like for me, it's like I can just, you know, I'll astral project, go in and be like, okay, what are they feeling? What are they thinking? How are they like, how do they, their makeup and everything? And I'll be like, oh, okay, I see how they did it that way, or I see why. And I understand, and how they feel justified, and you never get like an apology, and you know, and you know you're right. Your higher self is like, you did me so dirty. Like I don't even. And then the thing that I've been practicing lately is, you know, what I heard in the near death experience is that when someone, this woman died, and you know, she had to go through her life review, and she had to see like things that she, you know, like how she made someone feel by saying something she said to her little sister, and how she didn't even see at the time how she just wanted her to like get her off her back, and then how it like affected her down her life, right? But then what was even crazier, and now this has been so hard for me, because I'm a pretty transparent person anyway in general. But your thoughts, because you know, I have so many, I'm a Viking, so it's just, you know, it's Game of Thrones in my head. So that's why I'm doing martial arts. It's like to deal with my inner shadow, and how it would the dysfunction come out. It would be shopping. It would be like all these sweatsuits of like how to deal with the neuroses, or it would be, you know, maybe having a little too much to drink or too much to eat, or to self-soothe and to calm like the nervous system or something, where, you know, the intrusive thoughts of my inner Viking and having them now have a place where it's like, I just did a chokehold today. It was amazing. I had to like know how to kill a guy and choke someone. So wild. And at first, when I had to be introduced to martial arts, it was such a wild experience, because I had to confront my inner shadow of like, oh, I don't want to hurt you. I know I'm going to hurt you. It's going to happen. And I don't want to, like, that's more scary to me. Getting hurt, I could handle getting hurt so many more times, but hurting someone else is so much more scarier to me. And so like my intrusive thoughts come in that sort of form, because I care about people so much. So having to like know that I can have a place for it, and that my shadow, that she can exist in a healthy realm, you know, then it's like, huh. So going back to this whole long-winded sort of giving you the sort of frame of reference and the where my mind's at, but the near death experiences that our thoughts, just our thoughts alone, affect. And so if we're feeling resentment or anger or bitterness, like fuck that, fuck my ex, or fuck that guy, you know, and it gets put on them, and it stays on them. So she saw the manifestation of that staying like in them, and then they continue to be shittier people, and they never get to be like better, you know, because there is no separation. How you're originally talking about, there is no separation of self, and so how we're all connected. And so my new thing was really having to practice that. And sometimes intrusive thoughts are just intrusive. You're like, like, you know, you're like, I'm on the subway and I'm like, what if I just fell and electrocuted myself? Or you're on a cliff and you're like, what if I just, you know, and it's sort of like your neuroses of just trying to maintain like, hey, there's a danger here. Don't do this. I think that's like the evolutionary byproduct of what that is. But if there's an active, like, someone did me dirty and screw that person or whatever, and I'm right. And so this time I was like, what if I just prayed? And what if I just said, like, I forgive you and I'm sorry for where like I could have done things better, and really like releasing them and sending them good energy, because then like ultimately, if you know, I dated them and I love them, like why not send them love and happiness? Because I had to think about that, like the whole life review is not like some judgment of like all these people on a panel and being like you're bad. It's more of you judging you and being like, oh, I didn't learn this and I could have done this better, you know. But it makes it so much easier to love yourself and move through life if you're not carrying a big giant bag of burdens behind you, or you're carrying it, you're like, oh God, this is so heavy. And so I feel like that also releases these people that I love that I also maybe don't have to see in the next life. Like, I'm also okay with that, where I can be like, I forgive you, I love you, we're good, it's fine, I'm gonna go this way.
Yeah,
I think like God
absolutely.
practiced that, where he's like, he like got shot, he's like, I forgive you, bye. I don't want to do this again.
And it's almost like
just-
the divine will be like, so you're just trying to forgive just to get rid of them so you don't have to deal with it. And it's like, hang on a second. And you're like, no.
I know there's a loophole. It's not fully. Well, it's the first step. It's the first. But when I actually sat down and I started praying about them, I really did genuinely, because I think there is like a sense of like, I'm you, you're me. You know, how can I love you and release this? Because I do want your happiness and your well-being. Funny enough, like after my friend's funeral, I sent a drunken text to an ex and was like, I really wish you happiness. And I didn't hear back, but I really like sent peace and love. And even regardless of if they, you know, they did me dirty, it doesn't matter, because like they're on their healing journey, or they're learning, and they'll learn it or they won't. And the funny thing about patterns is we are who we are everywhere. Like, you know what I mean? Like if somebody's doing something to you, you know, they're doing it in their dating life to everyone else, you know, until you stop the pattern. Yeah. And so that was kind of a helpful thing with the whole life review, to kind of reflect that every thought that we have carries weight, and, you know, good or bad. So it's like, I'm so, it's exhausting sometimes, like thinking so much about being aware of your thoughts, because you're just like, oh my God, like I can't control all of it. Like, you know what I mean? And then I'm like judging myself for, you know, but I'm like, wait, but he judged me. So then I was judging him. Like, and then you're in this, there's this whole thing that this guy he kind of had a lower vibrational energy. And so when he kind of looked at me, I was like, oh, and I was very vulnerable at the time. I was, you know, my friend had just died. I was just sort of like, I was going through it. I was having a moment. And so I felt so open. And I just, in New York, if you're looking up and everyone can kind of read you really well in New York, which is really cool. But unfortunately, they're giant mirrors that they'll mirror exactly back. So I'm just like, okay, I'm going to, you know, I can't look at people right now. I don't want to deal with people. I'm angry. I'm kind of pissed off. And I just want to like, I just don't want to put this on anyone. I know this is myself. So I don't want to, you know, but then he was kind of already coming with some energy. So then, and then I felt so bad, because we were both, I guess, in this weird judgment thing, but it was an unspoken thing when you only know if you've done psychedelics, because you have these telepathic conversations. I've had these like, so then I was like, so then I like ran away, and then I came back later to the grocery store, and I was like, hey, so I was having just a weird moment and a thing and the whatever, and I'm sorry. And he was like, what?
It's so interesting.
But I feel like,
What goes on with like the processing of this journey, you know, like Pete and I will sit down and we'll debunk energy flows and why this happens, and, you know, are we doing the right thing, or is the ego in here, or like things like this. And it's just so good that you're processing. It's like all of us together doing this work is enlightening the planet. It's been just such a beautiful, elevated conversation today.
Coming on,
Thank you so much for coming on today.
that's so much information. I talked so much. I mean, I wanted to also hear your thoughts about, like, I do want to get your sense of, I mean, it seems like we're very on the same path of like, you know, walking this path of understanding that we're old souls apparently, but also finding, and why do you guys do what you do, interviewing, like having this podcast? Where did the idea come from? Were you just inspired about talking to people in their different journeys, and, you know, I guess the hardships that you guys went through too, and then alchemizing the same way and elevating and being these light warriors?
Yeah, I think well, we had our awakening, and it was just like so loud. And so we went to Costa Rica, did plant medicine 4 nights in a row, came back. The Palladians started talking to us on the aeroplane home, and I didn't think about anything outside of this planet, this realm, and came home, and we couldn't do insurance brokering anymore. We used to do mining insurance, and then we were like, okay, we're all in. And we went all in on this awakening education. So we teach courses and remote viewing, astral projection, like you're talking about, going up to galactic ships, using and talking telecommunication with extraterrestrial beings. And yeah, just the journey keeps unraveling. We're doing more movies and documentaries, and I think that's the link with connecting in with like your realm with actors and other like-minded souls that are in these different pockets, elevating and
You've had the aliens come visit you too?
yeah.
Yeah.
I've had the aliens visit me in dreams. The dead come speak to me. That's been a new thing. So I know when a friend had died, my friend's grandmother had died. So unbeknownst to me, had no idea. I'm walking my dog. All of a sudden this energy, like comes to me in the scared voice. I'm scared. I'm like, it's okay. And I'm like, all right, I'm either schizophrenic or, this is a real thing that's happening. So I'm like, no, it's okay. Go to the light. You're fine. And I helped her through the light. Call my friend and I'm like, did your grandmother just die? Because I just walked her into the light. And she's like, she just died 2 hours ago. So like my mom, I didn't know if you guys were open to that, which is kind of why I like, I was like,
yeah,
that sounds
everything. There's nothing that we probably wouldn't talk about now, hey.
And Susie, there's another
Did
lady
you
that
guys-
we interviewed on these elevated conversations, and she's like a psychic to the stars and to Hollywood, and she helps just like you did, exactly what you said. She helps souls either give a message back to someone here on planet Earth or helps them transition and integrate the lesson, doing what you're doing. So what we're doing is helping people to realize that this is becoming more and more normal, that you're not weird, that so often we try to be normal, we shut down our throat chakra and people don't like to have these conversations or talk about anything like that. Like the fact when you say to me, oh, I have so much empathy and I feel like when I see a homeless person that they might be, schizophrenic or actually really connected and gifted, but they can't handle it. It's like, from my perspective and our research, I know that there's this idea that let's call it the Galactic Federation, like higher frequency beings are trying to get the planet to help itself.
we're talking. I didn't know how far you guys wanted to go. Look. If we're talking like, come on. I get it. I know. I feel like generally like my friends I can talk about. I mean, my short, the film that we just did is me talking to my dead mother, like having conversations and having this whole thing and getting messages. Like she came to me when she died. The moment she died, it was around the same time that she was like, her message was, I miss being young, was sort of like her soul's thing that happened.
Oh.
Yeah. And then a lot of other messages, but she was like, every experience when I've helped souls move, they've like, it's always been a different experience where some people are very angry. Some people are like very scared. Some people are like, my mom was like, bitch, I agree. This is
Yeah.
amazing. I'm gone. You're fine. Yeah, it's fine. Who cares? So I was like, how you are in life is so who you are in the spirit world. Of course. Why would that wouldn't change? But the galactic, all the things that you're talking about is literally the things I do. But of course, I mean, I do believe that very much that the, schizophrenia, I think it is like, or borderline, not borderline, bipolar is spiritual split, the spiritual splitting of the self, or it's just like some trauma happened. Like, cause I know my friend who had passed, he was bipolar, but I'm convinced that it's not a real thing. Like it's just it's our way of saying, hey, here's some characteristics that somebody has and I can identify that, but you're not getting to the source of the problem, which is a misalignment spiritually and emotionally. And so there's a spiritual splitting. So these two parts are not talking. They're so far away from one another where it's this pendulum that swings and it needs to be integrated back, and, the trauma needs to be healed. So when it comes to schizophrenia, this is my own working theory, but the schizophrenia, same thing as well, where I think that, they were dealt a really rough hand. And, half the time where I do feel like I'm super eccentric because of that same feeling of like, I'm know what's going. I knew my house was going to burn down before it burned down. I knew when it burned down, and I felt like a crazy person because I was like, that was my like coming out party of like, I knew. I was like, I'm psychic. I knew this, and totally forgot about it. And I know the house is gone. I know it that night when I knew, like, I woke up that morning and the night before I knew my house is going to burn down. And God had told me 2 months, you need to move. And I was like, being my stubborn self was like, what? I'm not moving. This is Malibu. It's amazing. It's
Yeah, totally. Malibu's amazing.
And God's like, it's your burn. You need to move. And I didn't listen. And then the night before I went, oh, there's going to be a fire. Like, and then before my mom died, same thing. Like I pulled out a dress and I went, oh, that's a great dress for a funeral. And I went, what? And then I got these messages where like I would get this tingling on my back. And then I tuned into that message and it was like, everything's going to be okay. And I was like, who keeps pressing on my back? And kept telling me this was 2 weeks before it happened.
Crazy. We could
So,
talk
I mean,
with you. It was, I think we'll have to have you back on
I'm
the
sorry,
show
we have to go. I have to
for
let you
the
go. I would
galactic
love
conversation.
Yeah.
We
the minute
definitely,
you started talking about all these things, I
Yeah.
just ran with it. I was so
We love
excited.
it.
I'm so sorry.
we love the conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And where can everyone find you today, Susie?
Yeah, let's get them all connected to find you and follow and etc.
Oh God. On Instagram, Susie Abromeit. Sorry guys. I was a little bit all over the place today, but I get really excited and then I try to punctuality and conciseness is not the thing that I'm really good at, but
Well,
like
you
I'll
were on
eventually.
time. You were on time.
There's no time anyway.
It's just an illusion, right?
Yeah, the concept of time, there's no time up there.
Exactly.
There's
Like,
absolutely
who wants to be on time anyway? There is no time.
there is no
And
time.
that's your excuse. Time's just an illusion anyway. Don't worry about it. People will be like,
Ooh, but yeah, I would love to have this chat again because this is the kind of stuff that I literally talk about all the time about, what the Galactic Federation. I mean, I haven't delved too much into that. It's been more like the spirit world, the near-death experiences, how we're powerful and how we can manifest this life, what we're supposed to learn here. I know you guys have to go, but
between now and when we see you next, there could be some developments because you're very tuned in, and maybe that's the knock at the door, just planting the seed here today. I'd love to hear if anything
you have
happens.
a dream of going in a ship and they lie you down in a bed and they start to work on you and heal you, send us a message.
Yeah.
And we'll help you. That's our thing. We know all about that. They like
and
high vibrational beings like helping us to upgrade and to help us to integrate let's call it codes and galactic codes and upgrades, and you would be the sort of person where that would happen.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't normally say that to someone. It's not what I normally say. By the way, if you go to a ship and they lie down and work on you, ring us because we can chat. I actually don't think I've ever said that, but I feel like that would happen for you.
Yes.
The aliens did visit me, but after they showed me how the world really works and the horrors of the world, they're like, all right, you're not ready. Okay, let's go. She's not ready yet. They left.
Roxy got knocked back too. They actually said,
You did?
Yeah, they wouldn't let her up the rope. She was going up a rope to go up into the ship and she got denied. She wasn't ready.
They told me to go away. You're not ready yet. Raise your vibration a bit more. I was like,
you got to say that.
Same message.
Yeah, rejection. So the emotion, I had to work through that, right?
So I had too much emotion and they're like, because you can't. So when I've had this spirit world sort of experience, they're like, everything is okay. It's all good. We come here because we want to experience these emotions. And so we haven't quite ascended this because we're still in our bodies. And, so we're sort of in these two different worlds where, at least for me, it's like I'm stepping into the spirit world where everything is all good and there's no bad, like there's no good, there's no bad, it's all learning. And, but then here there is like your higher self. And when you're on the frequency of love, it's just all love. But sometimes, we get petty or we're like, like somebody like, driving gives you the finger, like, fuck no, fuck you, like, you know, and we're in these human bodies to experience. So yeah, I feel like maybe now and that was several years ago. Yeah, the aliens had told me that there was going to be a war. They said in 2019, they're like, prepare, they're depopulating the
Mhm.
world. It's a cycle that's happened since 1920, like 1929. And, you know, it's a cycle. So prepare, and there's going to be a war.
Mm.
Little did I know that COVID and everything and the, you know,
That's the
the
war.
war
Mm.
several ways. So that was interesting. Anyway, okay, I'll let you guys go. But this has been
Ah.
like but I have so many more questions. Oh my God. I would love to continue talking more.
If there's anything you want, reach out to us. We'll definitely line up another conversation. Let's do that for like a month's time or something. And I think magic will just unravel because we're all familiar with each other. It's like sitting with soul family, isn't it? It's just
I
like,
really want to send her the link to Vikings with the Rolo episode so that it's like so good. When you were talking about it and I realized you hadn't seen that, I was like thinking, oh my gosh, you've got to like watch that show.
yeah,
You'll
totally.
understand your lineage so much better. And like the warrior thing in you, you're going to understand it
She'll
more
sit
and
and
more.
veg like episode after episode after episode. You know, when you do like 10 in a
So
night.
you're just
It's
going to
like,
binge that.
yeah, it's so good. Thanks so much for
I
coming
really
on the
appreciate
show.
it.
So
Thank you
amazing
so
to meet
much.
you.